All right, welcome back to the Bat, Fox, and Flux Tavern, episode 10, Magic. The final episode of the show, sadly. We had planned to do one, possibly two more episodes, but unfortunately, due to scheduling issues, you won't be able to do that. And to talk a little bit about the scheduling issues, because I think we should mention those, Redfox, would you like to explain why we're having scheduling issues?
Have a job and it's a chaotic schedule. It's not standard hours, so I have trouble with getting time to be able to record these. Editing is no problem. I'm still editor, but after this episode, I'm going to have to step down, unfortunately, from being a co-host.
I still hold out hope that between now and season two won't be until maybe mid-late February. Give us a nice long break to kind of not think about D&D for a while so that we're not completely bored by this halfway through season two, that maybe things will change and your schedule open up a little bit more enough to allow. We'll see how it goes. We're going to play it by ear. So, magic. Magic is big. Unlike every other topic, magic is actually 2 chapters. So we're going to do something a little unorthodox for some things, not unorthodox for us because we're anything but orthodox at any given episode. I'm just going to very briefly, with the help of my co-host here, explain how magic works as general a sense as humanly possible, and then we're just going to kind of go through key spells for different classes capable of casting magic in the core book to kind of give you an idea of, as you're designing your character, what spells you do and don't want to keep an eye out for. So to start off with, we're going to go with how spellcasting works. Spellcasting works simply by casting your spell. You choose what spell from your list of spells. If you have spontaneous casting, that means that you usually have access to all of your spells at once, but only so many per day. So you simply just look at what spells you are capable of casting, and you pick which spell you want to use as long as you have a use of spells still remaining. If you're a wizard and you have to prepare your spells, then you look at the list you made of prepared spells. Always write down or note somewhere what spells you prepared ahead of time. Because although some DMs are a little lax about it because of the understanding of preparing spells can be very hit or miss, generally you want to know ahead of time which ones you prepared so that you're not just spontaneous casting while pretending that you prepared all your spells. Because that's not how preparing spells works. You're not a spontaneous caster. You're not supposed to be able to be like, oh, well, I could just do this. No, unless you thought ahead, you're not supposed to be able to just do that. Concentration is a factor to casting a spell. If you're hurt while you're trying to cast your spell, you have to roll concentration. Trying to cast a spell in melee will evoke an attack of opportunity from those enemies within range of you.
A throat punch, if you would.
Throat punch to the soul, even, if you will. Then you roll concentration. If you pass the concentration check, you overcome the distraction, as it were, of being hit in the face with something and continue to cast your spell. Some spells affect how other spells work around them. That gets into some very advanced magical tactics that really no one's ever bothered with, so that almost never comes up. If you're grappled or pinned, you're restricted in spells that don't require you to use somatic components, which is the moving of hands and other gestures. Vigorous motion, such as being in a bouncy wagon or on a boat that's in rough waters, anything that's causing a lot of motion to your body can distract you and make it very hard to cast your magic because you're being tossed about. Violent motion is the even bigger one, such as really stormy weather when you're on the ocean, tumbling down a mountainside, things like that. That makes it very hard, even more so than vigorous motion, to cast your spells. Violent weather, you can be distracted by thunderstorms, blizzards, any sort of weather that's very debilitating and trying to force you into shelter. If you're out in the middle of a blizzard or a massive thunderstorm, a hurricane, or a tornado, and you're trying to cast magic, that's distracting. Casting defensively, if you want to cast a spell without provoking an attack of opportunity, you need to dodge and weave, and you must make a concentration check to do so. If you're taking ongoing damage, that also requires a concentration check because the ongoing damage is distracting you, such as if you're bleeding out or you're on fire or whatever. Lastly, if you're entangled, if you're wrapped up in vines or you're tied up with rope or you just in a position where you're essentially all tied up, as it were, that further restricts your ability to cast magic without concentration checks and other restrictions. Then you have counterspells. Counterspells are retarded. The short version of counterspells. You have to ready an action with the same spell that you intend to counterspell to counter a spell. In layman's terms, if you wish to stop Fireball, you must prepare the turn before the Fireball a Fireball spell with the intention to dispel your opponent's Fireball spell. The amount of forethought involved in that is staggering. I have no idea who thought that this was a good idea. You literally have to know what your opponent's going to do the turn before he does it. And even then, especially if you're a wizard who has the most counterspell potential, you have to prepare the spell essentially the day before just to have it there ready to cast as a counterspell. And that just doesn't work. Thankfully, meta magic feats don't come into consideration when counteracting. So an enhanced fireball is just as easy to counter as a normal fireball. As difficult as that is, it takes one other headache off your head. You don't have to use an enhanced fireball to stop an enhanced fireball or enlarged fireball to stop an enlarged fireball. Certain magic spells are designed specifically as a counterspell, specifically dispel magic and dispel counterspell. They have a limited ability to counterspell by default just by using themselves, but your opponent has the ability to overcome your dispelling or countering effect and continue to cast their spell through it. So it's not perfect, unlike a normal counterspell, which is just a perfect even countering out of two identical spells. Lastly, the only other way to counterspell is certain spells are designed to counteract each other. If you slow somebody and you cast haste on them, it counteracts the slow. If you light something on fire and you cast a spell that specifically puts out fire, then you've successfully countered the spell that set something on fire. And that's really the basics of magic in a nutshell. Spell descriptions. There's really not much really you need to note about spell descriptions other than what components they require, other than the school of magic, which is very important if you have any intention of specializing, or if you have anything that specifically notes special rules regarding other schools of magic. The schools of magic are abjuration, conjuration, divination, enchantment, evocation, illusion, transmutation, and necromancy. Each school has a certain type spell that fall under it. Abjuration spells are protective spells. Conjuration spells belong to 5 different subschools. Calling spells are used for summoning. Creation spells manipulate matter to create objects or creatures. Specifically, calling spells, it's a summoning by calling an existing creature to where you are, whereas creation creates a new creature from scratch. There's a distinction there. Healing, obviously, heals things. Summoning spell, which instantly brings a creature object to a place you designate, which is a little different than calling. Calling takes a little bit of time, but summoning is this instant you just call them to you through time and space. Then teleportation, which allows you to teleport yourself or others, or even objects various distances, even across planar boundaries.
Now, the difference between summoning and calling is calling, you're actually calling the creature to you, whereas summoning, if the summoned creature dies, it doesn't actually die. It just takes about 24 hours for the creature to reform, during which time it can't be summoned again. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Calling is you're actually calling forth the entity. Summoning, you're summoning a part of the entity.
A calling is a full living, breathing entity in flesh and blood, whereas a summoning's more like a shadow of it in a way. It's a living piece of the creature that, for all intents and purposes, takes the form and powers of that creature, but is not truly that creature. And thus, when it's destroyed, it doesn't actually kill the creature because you didn't actually summon the creature so much as you summoned a copy of the creature almost.
That and a summoned creature can be dispelled, whereas a called creature cannot be dispelled.
Another thing of noting is summoned creatures are usually in some way, shape, or form inherently magical in nature, which is why you can summon just a piece of them. You're essentially calling in a piece of their magic and using that magic to form a duplicate of them. And then you have divination. They're mostly used for learning secrets, predict the future, find hidden things and such. They involve things like reading minds, viewing distant things, scrying, things like that. If you want to detect things, find things, spy on things, just magically know things that others do not know or may keep closely guarded secrets that only they know, divination is the school of magic you look in for spells that do stuff like that. Enchantment spells affect the minds of others. There are things like charms and compulsions that force or suggest that a creature do a particular thing. Some require you to already have somewhat of a good or at least a neutral footing with the creature so that they're inclined to believe that what you're telling them to do is in their best interest and thus causes them to do it because you're basically magically sweetening your words. You're taking magic to give yourself a silver tongue, basically, and just convince them that what you want them to do is what they should do at this exact moment. Whereas a compulsion is you're dominating their will to your will and you're forcing them to take an action or an inaction, as some cases may be. Evocation spells manipulate energy, tap unseen sources of power, and in so doing, produce desired ends. That's where you get things like your fireballs, your magic missiles, your lightning bolts. Pretty much anything that calls forth some destructive force or protective force in a physical sense, and then has it carry out your will. Illusion, self-explanatory. You create illusions. Some of them can be heard, some can be seen, some can be heard and seen, some can even be felt or smelt. Illusions can affect any of the five senses or all of the five senses. Some of them are so real that they can affect other things while being unaffected by them in return. Some are even more real than that, to the sense that they can kill something even though they don't actually exist. Necromancy involves manipulating the power of death, unlife, and just life force in general. Worth noting, necromancy is not inherently evil. In a technical sense, resurrecting the dead, you're bringing a man who died back to life exactly as he was in life, is necromancy, but is not evil. Bringing him back as a zombie, a skeleton, or some sort of a ghost, specter, wraith, that is evil, usually. Not always, but usually. There's this fine line in necromancy where some necromancy isn't inherently evil. You're simply tapping into and manipulating the forces of life and death. What you choose to do with that tapping into determines usually whether or not a spell is evil or not. Although some spells are inherently evil because of what they do to the fabric of the universe and life, death, etc. Lastly is transmutation, which lets you change the properties of creatures, things, and conditions. Do like shape changing, polymorph, turning stone to mud and mud to stone, wood to steel and steel to wood, etc. That's all transmutation. That's really all you really need to know about the schools of magic. And as far as descriptors go, we can really go into that more once we actually start describing spells. The last two things to note is there are two types of spells, really: arcane and divine. Arcane spells tap into the mystical energies of the universe, but doesn't really delve into the realms of the gods' magic. That's divine spells. Divine spells tap their power directly from a god or an ideal. The existence of the faith of something is so powerful, it creates a magical energy that a divine spellcaster can tap into. Arcane spells simply tap into the forces that control the world and bind it together. I say simple, but that sounds a lot more impressive than it is for most spells. So without further ado, let's get into actual spells. Just a word of note though, special abilities like spell-like abilities, supernatural abilities, extraordinary abilities, and natural abilities, they can mimic spells, but they are not themselves spells. A dragon breathing fire is technically not a magic spell. You can't really do anything to them as far as counterspelling them or getting an attack of opportunity because a dragon breathed fire while you were next to it, because that's just a supernatural thing the creature inherently is capable of doing.
What up, dragon? I'm counterspelling your fire breath. The fuck you are. Boosh.
Yes, never try to counterspell the dragon. He'll simply laugh in your face as it melts away.
I got 4 other claw attacks.
Yeah, even if you could counterspell a dragon, he's got 4 claw attacks, a tail attack, and an automatic bite. He's still gonna wreck your day up, with or without the fire breath or the acid breath or whatever the hell he breathes.
Before we get into specific spells, though, we probably should make note that there are different tables for different classes. Bards have their own spell list, clerics have their own spell list, on top of domain lists, which is a pain to remember. Druids have their own lists, paladin have their list, rangers have their list, and sorcerers and wizards share a list. The reason why that needs to be brought up is different lists have different spells accessible at different levels.
The first spells I want to get into are specifically the Bard spell list. The Bard spell list is the list of spells that only a Bard needs to care about because they tell the Bard when he gets what spell and what it does. Bards have, like all spellcasters, level 0 spells. Level 0 spells are usually very simple. They do very mundane things. They're usually shared amongst almost every single spellcasting type. Not all of them are, most are. Bards get things like dancing lights, which just makes magical torches and other items. Bards can detect magic, so do wizard as level 0. It's also level 0 for clerics. Detect magic is just a multiple turn spell. It just lets you detect spells and magic items within 60 feet. And the more you concentrate, the more you learn about how many there are within 60 feet. And if you concentrate even further, more about one specific thing that you can sense within that 60 feet that you choose to focus all of your attention on. Say you detect 3 things that are magical. You just detect magic. Then the next turn, you detect that there's 3 things emanating this magic. And then on the third turn, you decide one of the 3 things you're going to really focus on and learn as much as you can about its magic. Things like that are level 0 spells. Level 1 spells are generally going to be at low level, the spells that are kind of your trump cards in battle as a spellcaster. For a bard, that's when you start getting into your ability to start influencing people. You can use Charm Person, Cause Fear. You can make an object immune to magical detection. You can create minor illusions that just silently move about. You can put things to sleep if they're weak enough to succumb to your wanting to put them to sleep. My favorite thing to have a bard get right away is a spell called Tasha's Hideous Laughter. You just distract a guy for 1 round per level by having a horrendous, otherworldly laughter just echo around him that just freaks him the fuck out. I don't know why I love that spell, I just do. So if you're a bard, you're going to get all your level 0s. At level 1, some of the things I recommend is, for anyone, if you have access to Alarm, get Alarm. Alarm's a good spell. It lets you ward an area for 2 hours per level, and it's very useful for when you're on your watch. If you don't have a decent ability to spot or hear things getting near camp, just ward the area with Alarm, and you're good to go. Even if you miss something coming, once it gets into camp, a big magical alarm sound's going to go off and go, hey, fuckers, there's something here. Definitely at second level, you get access to more interesting things like Tech Thoughts. Tech Thoughts for a bard is very fun to use because bards are usually a party face when they're in the party, and giving them the ability to listen to surface thoughts while they're talking to somebody can be a very useful bargaining tool. Whispering Wind's very useful for a bard. It lets them send short messages up to 1 mile per level on the wind itself. Tongues is very useful for them because it will let them speak any language for a certain amount of time. Suggestion's good. Some of the illusion spells are very useful. Hold Person can be very useful at later levels. I don't know if you want to get it right away, but Hold Person can be very useful because it will make someone stand still long enough for people to run up and punch them in the face. Darkness can be useful if you're running away. I think darkness is kind of a two-edged sword. Nothing can see through darkness or illuminate darkness, the spell, unless it specifically allows it to target magical darkness, such as the darkness spell. And so its main use is to create an area where nothing can see in and out of, so that you can cover and escape. Delay Poison's alright, but really if you're a bard, you're not focusing too much on healing stuff, and Delay Poison's more of a cleric thing. At third level, Blink is very useful. If you're a spellcaster and you can get Blink, get it. It lets you randomly vanish and reappear for 1 round per level, which basically means you flicker in and out of reality very rapidly, which makes it really hard for things to hit you, because for the moment they're swinging at you, there's a percentage chance that you're just going to not be there for that split second. Meanwhile, you're allowed to freely hit them because you can time your blinks with your strikes, because you know exactly when you're going to blink and not blink. Glibness is a very broken level 3 bard spell. You get a plus 30 bonus on bluff checks, and your lies can escape magical discernment. So no one can magically tell you're lying, and you get plus 30 on bluff checks.
See, invisibility is a very good one to have, just so you can just reveal invisible creatures or objects around you.
Leoman's Tiny Hut is very good. It lets you make a magical hut that will appear for so many hours and then go away. Very useful when you're making camp in the wilderness, because it will make room for itself if it has to. If there's trees in the way, it'll just push the trees aside magically until it goes away. Then the trees kind of move back in.
If you are a backup cleric, you can use Remove Curse to remove a curse from your party.
You can also choose to get Cure Serious Wounds, which, if you're a backup healer, I don't really recommend moderate or light wounds as a cure spell. Always wait till you can get Serious Wounds, because Serious Wounds is a very good heal, and it doesn't feel like a wasted spell slot. Whereas Light Wounds always feels like a wasted spell slot, and so does Moderate unless you're the primary healer. Because low-level spells are very utilitarian, and if you're not the healer and you're taking those spells, that's one utilitarian spell you're not taking. Haste can be useful. Illusory Skip can be useful, especially in an intrigue campaign, making what you're writing invisible so that only the intended reader can read it. Speak with Animals is okay, but really a bard doesn't really need to talk to animals very often. That's more of a ranger or a druid thing. Deep Slumber, 10 hit dice of creature, can be put to sleep by that. At the level you get it, that's a lot of things that you can just put to sleep. Crushing Despair is good. It makes whoever you affect Crushing Despair on take -2 on their attack rolls, their damage rolls, their saves, and their checks. And you can also get Clairvoyance and Clairaudience, which lets you hear or see at a distance for 1 minute per level. So that brings you to your 4th level bard spells. Again, if you're the backup cleric, maybe take Cure Critical Wounds, but usually you only need Serious Wounds if you're the backup healer. That's really going to be the only heal spell you need, and that's really mostly just so you can heal the healer. Dimension Door can be very useful. Just make sure you can see where you're going, otherwise you may end up in a wall, and you don't want to end up in a wall. Horrible things happen if you teleport into a wall by accident. Break Enchantment is very useful. It allows you to break enchantments, alterations, curses, and petrification. Hold Monster is much, much more useful than Hold Person. Hold Monster lets you hold any creature that you can target by just compelling them to stay still. Although I believe you can't use that to put them in any kind of a danger. Like, you can't tell them to hold still while the lava comes at them. Nor can you tell something to hold still while it's in midair so it crashes to its own death. The fight or flight instinct always breaks compulsions and illusions usually. Invisibility Greater can be very useful. It lets the bard become invisible and attack while invisible. Legend Lore, incredibly useful, lets you learn tales about a person, place, or thing. Leoman's Secure Shelter is basically a bigger, better version of Tiny Hut. Modify Memory can be very useful. You can change 5 minutes of a subject's memory.
But for a second, modify memory. Is there any limitations on how far back you can change a memory?
I think it has to be a recent memory. Although I do believe you can using it over and over again.
5 minutes of memory.
Any 5 minutes or just the most recent 5 minutes?
Can I make someone think their name is Fred because that's what their mom called them when they were born?
No, because the rest of the 5 minutes of the memory would still have the other name.
It actually doesn't specify when the memory was. It just limits how much you can change.
I'm going to have to play around with that then, because the idea of a villain who's slowly using modify memory on somebody to slowly turn them into a puppet by modifying their memory 5 minutes at a time is kind of hilarious and terrifying. Hell, they could slowly make someone look insane doing that just by doing stuff.
Insert an embarrassing memory into the beholder's mind. When he grimaces in thought of remembering that day, you can attack him.
Change the last 5 minutes of the beholder's mind to make him think you're his best friend.
Remind him of that day in Beholder class where he asked a girl out and she laughed at him.
Neutralize Poison. If you're the backup cleric, you might want to get it if you want. There's not always a lot of reason to get Neutralize Poison unless there's a lot of poison in your campaign. Shout's really a really powerful spell. It's 5d6 sonic damage. It's a cone where you just shout so loud that you just deafen everything and blow their eardrums out. Although there's no actual force to it, if you get what I mean. Rainbow Pattern can be surprisingly useful. It's a bunch of rainbow lights that just dance in front of something's face, and you can target up to 24 hit dice of creatures, and it basically distracts them as they go ooh shiny for a turn or two, which allows you to just either get away or run up and punch them in the face while they're distracted, which I believe will grant a backstab to a rogue. A rogue bard combo is hilarious, where the bard just makes them go ooh shiny, and the fucking rogue comes up and stabs them in the trachea. Zone of Silence is very useful. It keeps eavesdroppers from overhearing conversations within the cone. That's really all the ones I would really suggest at 4th level. At 5th level for a bard, Spell Magic Raider is always good to have, no matter your class. Dream can be useful. You can send messages to anyone sleeping. False Vision is useful if you come up against scrying a lot, because you could use an illusion to make them think they're seeing the illusion instead of what's actually going on. Mind Fog looks intense. Subjects in Fog get -10 to Wisdom and Will checks. Very useful if you have a lot of compulsion effects, as that relies on will checks and wisdom to overcome. So you just put them in the fog and then start bombarding them with compulsions. Nightmare is pretty interesting. If you can put your enemy to sleep, use Nightmare, and they'll get a vision that deals 1d10 damage. Shadow Evocation's incredibly broken because it leads to some other things later down the road. Shadow Evocation is any evocation spell of lower than 5th level that's 20% real. You can essentially make a Shadow Fireball that is 20% as real and deadly as an actual fireball. Shadow Walk is very useful. It lets you travel through shadows.
Because the speed of darkness is quicker than the speed of light, yo.
Yes, it is. Song of Discord is funny because you get to make things attack each other that normally wouldn't attack each other. And Mass Suggestion is very powerful because you can influence multiple things at once and just plant a single subliminal suggestion in their mind that they feel compelled to follow out. It can't be anything that would bring them direct harm, because again, fight or flight instincts break compulsions and things like that. But you just mass suggest that an angry mob calm the fuck down, or that a not angry mob becomes an angry mob. And then eventually, through their own natural train of thought, by being an angry mob, they'll come to some angry mob mentality decision that does not get overridden because they came to it of their own accord. Learning what to and what not to suggest can be very powerful because you can overcome the limitation of not putting something in danger by suggesting something to them that will lead them to naturally make the conclusion to do what you wanted them to do that would put them in danger. Because technically that's a loophole in the spell, that as long as they come to a conclusion on their own, it doesn't break the compulsion. 6th level Bard spells, the final level for Bard. Sympathetic Vibration can be very powerful. It's 2d10 damage per round to a freestanding structure. Basically, you find the sympathetic frequency for a solid object, and you cause a counteracting vibration in it that will eventually shake it apart. Veil can be useful when you want to be disguised. You can change the appearance of a group of creatures. Greater Shout is basically Shout but bigger. Otto's Irresistible Dance. Do not underestimate the power of the Irresistible Dance. Otto's Irresistible Dance is the one compulsion I know of where the fight or flight instinct does not break it. They are forced to dance, even as you're stabbing them repeatedly in the face as they dance, and they are unable to do anything else but dance. If you make them fall into the spell of the dance, They will dance till they die, or till the spell runs out. But usually if you have a fighter nearby, he's going to kill them long before that spell runs out. Charm Monster Mass is like Charm Monster, but for all monsters within 30 feet. Animate Objects lets you make objects attack your foes. Think of killer version of the Beauty and the Beast servants. There's really not much else that you can get for a bard at 6th level. At 6th level, you don't get too many spells. If you want to get Gaius/Quest, you can get it. It forces something basically to do a quest or else, kind of a thing. You just tell them, do this thing for me or you die. And if they don't do it within, I think, a year, they actually die. It's a hilarious way to deal with the final villain. I give you 1 year to fix everything you fix or you die. What? Yeah, go get to it. Hero's Feast is a decent utility. It gives food for 1 creature per level and cures and grants combat bonuses. Find the Path is useful. It shows you the most direct way to the location you're trying to get to. For 6th level spells, it's all I'd really recommend as something to look at. Now we get to cleric spells. Any spell I recommended for a previous class, assume it's recommended for the next class as well, because usually if the other class shares a spell with a previously mentioned class and they both have access to that spell, that doesn't make the spell any less useful. They just might get it at a different level or have other things I'll point out that are also useful. It all depends on how you want to build your spellcaster. For clerics, you definitely need your cure spells. Create Water is useful. Detect Poison is useful. As a cleric, you get all of your spells, but you only get to cast so many. Always want to have your cure spells ready, and if you don't take your cure spell, that's okay, because you can convert a regular spell into a cure spell. Clerics just have the ability to do this. Detect Chaos, Evil, Good, and Law can be useful if you suspect that someone or something is in an area and is strongly Chaos, Evil, Good, or Law. You can basically scan for that alignment.
Or you can do it whenever you want.
Yep, there's no reason not to do it whenever you want.
Do it always. Check if anyone's evil. If they are, destroy them. Or be friends with them if you're chaos.
Endure Elements is useful for when you're in hostile environments. It lets you basically ignore severe hot and cold and make you feel like you're in sort of a medium, comfortable temperature area at all times. Entropic Shield's a useful defensive spell to keep in mind. It reduces ranged attacks against you by giving them a 20% miss chance. You can hide from the undead. You can obscure the area around you with mist. You can just choose to protect yourself from Chaos, Evil, Good, or Law by giving yourself an armor bonus against whatever you pick. You can also summon monsters as clerics at various levels. Consecrate. Very useful to do Consecrate if you know there's a lot of undead around. Consecrate the ground and all undead around you will become weaker because you will fill the area with positive cleansing energy. People, for some reason, never think to do this. It's a very useful strategy. If you know there's undead around, just consecrate the site and you don't have to worry about it. They're all going to get weaker. If you're an evil cleric, there's some options as well, like Death Knell. Delay Poison, useful. If you're evil and you want to do the opposite of making undead weaker, you want to make them stronger, then Desecrate a spot and make it inherently negative and evil. Zone of Truth is very powerful. All subjects within range of the zone cannot tell lies. They have the ability to try and resist the Zone of Truth, and I think all that lets them do is say nothing when questioned. They're trying not to speak as opposed to trying to avoid telling the truth. You can make your alignment undetectable for 24 hours, which can be useful if you're trying to avoid other divine classes of an evil nature. You can animate the dead, which is inherently evil, if you make zombies and skeletons. You can create food and water. You can dispel magic, as most classes can. Never underestimate dispel magic. Magic Circle against Chaos, Evil, Good, and Law is a stronger version of the protection spell. You can speak with the dead. If anyone has seen Hellboy, they will probably recall the scene in which he brings back a dead person in a cemetery with which to ask questions. As a cleric, you can do exactly that. You get to ask 1 question per 2 levels, and it has to answer them. There are limits to this. It can't answer things it didn't know in life. It'll give a very simplified answer, and it may simply repeat the same answer over and over again, but still, for a 3rd level spell, that can be very useful. You can eventually walk on water as a cleric and breathe in water, which is very useful. Then at 4th level, you can walk on air, which, to Redfox's chagrin, one of our clerics did once when he fully intended to baffle us with a puzzle. It's like, haha, one of these things is a jumping puzzle. You have to jump and pick the right platform. It's like, no, we just walk across the air.
That spell can really be fun.
The Planner Ally spells, I believe, are unique to clerics. I know Planner Ally in and of itself is a divine spell, so arcane casters don't get it. But it lets you exchange services with a 6 hit dice extra planner creature. As you level up, the hit dice increases, and you basically get to make a deal and bargains and trades with various extra dimensional planner creatures, like angels and devils and anything basically that lives in a plane other than the material plane. Death Ward is very useful once you're able to use that. It protects against death spells and negative energy effects, which can get really annoying at high levels.
Speaking of death, Restoration allows you to restore level and ability score drains from death.
Yes, and from pretty much anything. If you took ability score damage, having Restoration handy is very good. Once you're at 5th level, you can finally learn Raise Dead, which is restoring to life a subject who died as long as 1 day per level ago. The weakest of the ability to resurrect people is Raise Dead. Unfortunately, you have to have that ready to go as soon as someone dies, pretty much. You start learning some of the simple things, which lets you create runes that cause effects like one puts them to sleep, one causes them to be racked with pain. There's Slay Living, which I think is an evil spell. It's a touch attack that just instantly kills a living creature that you touch. Clerics also have Plane Shift and any plane spell for that matter at the lowest level at 5th level. Getting Plane Shift, which as many as 8 subjects per level can travel to another plane, which I believe is because of their divine connection to their magic. You get Flame Strike at the 5th level, which is a very powerful offensive spell. You smite foes with Divine Fire for 1d6 level of damage. Hallow, which is kind of like Consecrate, but much more powerful. You literally create Holy Ground with that spell. There's an evil version of it called Unhallow, which does exactly the opposite. It's essentially Desecrate, but better. 6th level, you can animate objects. You can create a barrier of blades. You get better access to cure spells. You get Find the Path, just like a bard does. You can use Gaia's Quest like a bard does. You get the stronger version of Planner Ally. You get Undeath to Death, which allows you to just destroy 1d4 hit dice per level of undead up to 20d4. It's just your way of just saying screw you to undead around you. 7th level is when you start getting your really fun stuff. 7th level and 8th level. Any spellcaster capable of reaching those levels is where the fun magic begins. You get things like Blasphemy. Kills, paralyzes, weakens, and or dazes non-living subjects. You get to control the weather in the local area. You get Destruction, which not only kills the subject, but it destroys the remains, preventing them from being resurrected. Ethereal Jaunt, which lets you become ethereal, which makes you harder to hit. Holy Word, which is the opposite of Blasphemy, where Blasphemy is non-evil, Holy Word is non-good. If you're not good, Holy Word will kill, paralyze, blind, or deafen you based on how not good you are.
No, it bases off of your hit die.
Really? So even if you're neutral, Holy Word will kill you. Okay, good to know.
If you're neutral, yeah, it will kill you if you're low enough. If you have good, you're safe from it, but if you're not good, you're going to take a hit from it.
Before you use Holy Word, ask yourself, is anyone in the party neutral? Because they may just be killed by the Word of God.
Do I want to blow up all the insects and animals nearby?
Oh yeah, that too. Plant life as well. If it's any sentient plant life that happens to be in the area will also probably be destroyed.
No plants blow up except one. Well, I guess that plant thought Hitler had the right idea.
Refuge is very useful. It alters an item to transport its possessor to you. You basically give that to somebody you want to be able to bring back to you at the drop of a hat, if you need to summon somebody to help you, or if you need to pull them out of danger. Regenerate lets you grow severed limbs back. Greater Restoration restores all levels and ability scores. Resurrection fully restores a dead subject that died within the last year.
It's not true resurrection. Have level loss and penalty.
There will be level loss and there will be penalties. You get Word of Chaos, which is the chaotic version of Holy Word and Blasphemy. There's also a lawful one. I don't remember what the lawful version is. I guess you don't get level 7. Level 8, you get Anti-Magic Field, which negates magic within 10 feet of the field. Cloak of Chaos, which protects against law. Create Greater Undead, which if you're evil is amazing, because then you start to make shadows, wraiths, specters, and devourers. Even better Cure Spell. Dimensional Lock, which teleportation and interplanar travel is blocked for 1 day per level within the area of the Dimensional Lock. Earthquake, self-explanatory, you make an Earthquake. Firestorm, you deal 1d6 per level fire damage as you make fire rain from the heavens.
You become Moses, essentially, in this level.
Yeah, Firestorm's kind of amazing. Holy Aura, which is protection against evil. Inflict critical wounds. Worth noting, there are inflict spells, which are basically the anti-version of cure spells, which use negative damage to inflict wounds. Shield of Law, which is basically Cloak of Chaos, but reversed. It protects against chaos instead of protecting against law. Spell Immunity, Greater. Symbol of Death, Symbol of Insanity, Unholy Aura. These are all fun spells to play around with, but once you start getting up 8th level, you really have to pick and choose your spells very carefully. And clerics can never take alignment-based spells that are against their own alignment. So no good cleric is going to be running around protecting himself against good.
And I'll point out something. Also, because you're a cleric, these aren't the only spells you're getting. You're also getting your domain spells, so it's not as clear cut and dry.
Well, I still think the 9th level spells. 9th level spells, you have True Resurrection. Never not take True Resurrection. If you're evil or not caring about casting evil spells because you're neutral, get Soulbind. Soulbind is bullshit. Gate is very powerful. It connects 2 planes for travel or summoning. Energy Drain causes negative levels, and Astral Projection lets you project onto the astral plane. Lastly, Etherealness is the only other useful level 9 spell really that isn't really kind of hit or miss. It lets you go to the ethereal plane with your companions. More often than not, clerics are the ones that are going to be facilitating your interplanetary travel.
There's 2 other really interesting spells that clerics get at 9th level. There's Implosion, where you can just kill things with your mind, and then there's Miracle, Sovek.
Oh, right, Miracle. You literally request your god's intercession on your behalf, and they will cause a miracle if they choose to grant it.
This is a fertile ground for a GM to do whatever they want. But if you call upon it, you pretty much win any battle if you ask your god to give the cost.
Unless the god decides, fuck you, you're not supposed to ask me for help.
Yeah, a cleric of core doesn't get much, but...
Yeah, a cleric of Cord will just get Cord yelling at him and maybe slapping him in the face. And now domains.
As we discussed way back in classes, clerics get to choose domains based on their deity or worship or whatever, and they get special, nice little spells that are part of that domain. And as you level up, you get access to the levels of the different domains, and the domains are air, animal, chaos, death, destruction, earth, evil, fire, good, healing, knowledge, law, luck, magic, plant, protection, strength, sun, travel, trickery, war, and water. And that's just in the core book. There are several expansions that add even more domains with even more spells, making the cleric table the most expansive spell list of all classes.
So help you if you're a cleric wizard multi-class, you have the potential to one day know every single spell in the universe. Something really quick to know about domain spells is your deity will determine which domains are available to you. You can only take 2 domains, and each domain gives you a granted power that can be used once a day or so many times per day or so many minutes or hours a day, or etc. Then, on top of that, for each level up this level chart you go, you will get 1 special spell from each domain. Picking a random one on the page I'm at, let's say the War domain. When you have your level 1 spells, on top of your level 1 cleric spells, you gain access to magic weapon. Level 2, you get spiritual weapon. 3, magic vestment. 4, divine power. 5, flame strike. 6, blade barrier. 7, power word blind. 8, power word stun. And 9, power word kill, which just kills anything with 100 HP or less. All domains do this. You get your power, which in the case of the war domain is a little meh. You get free martial weapon proficiency with your deity's favorite weapon if necessary, and weapon focus with the deity's favorite weapon. The favorite weapon of the war deities is then listed in there. And then each time you gain a new level of spell, you get the appropriate spell level domain spell that you always have in addition to your spells. Druids, really, the kind of short version druids, want lightning spells for druids. Druids' lightning spells are hilarious. Lightning Storm, Lightning Strike. They can summon Nature's Ally, which is like the summon creature spells, but they call creatures to fight for you instead of summoning them. They could do Entangle, which is hilarious because everything within 40 feet gets entangled by plants overgrowing the area, which, as I discovered, can be lit on fire, creating a 40-foot zone of fire. For the most part, they don't get too much that others don't. Call Lightning is very useful. You get called on lightning bolts from the sky each turn as a lightning storm just awakens above you. Anti-life shell prevents living things from getting around you. You get Wall of Stone, spike growth. Firestorm is incredibly powerful, just like the cleric version. Creeping Doom, it creates swarms of centipedes that attack at your command. That's a high level one. High level, they can animate plants to fight for them. There's really a lot that druids get, but most of it revolves around plants and animals, and manipulating existing plants and animals or creating new plants and animals to then manipulate at will after they've been created. Paladins, there's no need to speak about paladins.
Actually, there is, because they have a crap ton of unique spells.
They have a crap ton of unique spells, but you'll never see them because you'll never play a paladin. I don't think we've stressed this enough. Just don't play paladins.
I'll give you a quick rundown on paladin spells. Paladin spells are all pretty much a lot more offensive and buff-based cleric spells. They don't deal with as much healing. In fact, paladins don't really get a really useful heal until their second level of spells. But they're all like buff, make your swords better, or call down the holy power of God to kill enemies. Paladins are also pretty much the only class that gets mount-based spells, because paladins, rightfully so, are mount-based. So they'll be able to heal their mount they'll be able to summon more mounts. They'll be able to do things that buff their mount, unlike other spellcasters. And that's pretty much it. I'll point out 2 things that paladins get that are of note. Paladins are the only people to get Holy Sword, which lets them turn their weapon into a +5 holy weapon, which is actually really nice. Also, a spell that clerics get as well, but paladins have a much better use of, is Mark of Justice. You put a mark on a creature, it takes 10 minutes, so it's usually used for if a villain repents or you capture someone. It takes 10 minutes, and then you designate some kind of criminal action. If the target ever does that action in their life until the mark is dispelled, it does not run out normally. Target immediately becomes cursed, even if you're nowhere to be seen. So you can make sure that whoever you caught will repent.
Right. That's one of the few things that they got right on Paladin, I think. Do you have anything else to go on about Paladins then?
They can heal their mounts.
That's always useful.
Pretty much everything else is a cleric spell or bard spell or druid spell.
Another thing worth noting, because I forgot about, druids, as we mentioned back when we covered druids as a class, have a restriction that they're not allowed to wear metal, or use metal for the most part. They have a spell that lets them turn any metal within 40 feet to wood of their choice, but it retains all of the stats of being metal in the case of equipment. Druids can, in theory, find a full set of plate mail and make it wooden plate mail that acts just like metal plate mail. For the most part, rangers pretty much share almost all of their spells with druids. The really standout ones for rangers are ones that allow the ranger to track better, control the field, especially if they're a ranged ranger. If they can keep things in place with things like Entangle, that's a very useful thing to focus on as a ranger. Anything that helps you do better as an outdoorsman is a very useful spell to go after, but for the most part, rangers have everything druids have.
Except for the fact they only have 4 levels of spells instead of 9.
Right. Just like paladins also have only 4 levels of spell. Lastly, the big list. Sorcerers and Wizards. Sorcerers and Wizards have a massive spell list. Unfortunately, because of the size of that massive spell list, there's really not much we can go too in depth onto. Pretty much, other than spells unique to clerics, druids, rangers, paladins, and bards, most spells, I'd say 80 to 90% of the spells that the other classes have, the sorcerers and wizards have, and more. They have an impressively large list of spells broken up by school of magic. The one thing I'm going to say about sorcerers and wizard spells that's worth noting is the concept of specialization. If you choose one school of magic that you are incapable of learning, you may choose then one school of magic at which you excel and have specialized at the cost of the other school of magic. There's no right or wrong answer in doing that, but it does give you a bonus.
There's only a few spells that really should be talked about. Featherfall is really important because objects fall slowly. That's going to save your life lots and lots of times. Prestidigitation, a level 0 cantrip, is your friend for all your nice little sparkly stuff to do magic tricks. Most of the Sorcerer Wizard are your damage dealing spells of different types. 6th level, you have True Seeing, lets you see things as they really are in reality. Level 5, there is Teleport. Careful with that one.
Yeah, also at level 5 is, I think, from the Universal school that wasn't touched on because it doesn't technically exist. Universal are ones that no one school controls.
Permanency, which makes certain spells permanent. So you can have lasting effects. And that spell is your friend. You're going to be using that a lot.
Yeah, it does cost XP to use, as I recall. And the materials are expensive, especially because it's based on the level of the spell you're making permanent. But you can make certain very powerful utility spells permanent on a person or on an item. And that usually outweighs the cost of XP, especially at higher levels where the XP cost of permanency is a pittance.
Wait, hold up. I have follow-up questions for that one then. Enlarge is a spell, right?
I'm looking up what spells qualify because there is a list of what spells can and can't.
And while you're doing that, I do have to say that there was one druid you missed that is very important to have at later levels, and that is Awaken Plant and Animal, which allows you to do exactly that. Make an animal or plant sentient. And it is amazing. I love doing it.
Okay, I have the full list of permanency. Enlarge does count.
So my question is, can you enlarge a person and make it permanent, then cast Enlarge on them and make them a giant creature?
Yes.
Can you continually do that and make a colossal creature?
Yes.
Ah, cool.
It's 500 XP and you have to wait till the 9th level caster, but you can do it. 500 XP at 9th level is nothing, but the wait to 9th level is what will balance that out. For permanency, because I love permanency, what you can make permanent in regards to yourself, and this is incredibly powerful. You can make Arcane Sight, Comprehend Languages, Dark Vision, Detect Magic, read magic, see invisibility, and tongues. What this essentially means is that you understand everything. The wizard with permanency has the potential to create for himself a state of permanent understanding of anything he sees, hears, or speaks to. He will never again need to worry about trying to detect magic by wasting a spell slot. He'll never have to worry about trying to worry about if something's invisible. He can always read magical writing. He can always see the effects of magic. He can always speak any language and understand any language. And he always has dark vision. Dark vision is amazing. In regards to other people, a large person, Magic Fang as well as Greater Magic Fang, queries telepathic bond, but only 2 creatures per casting. So that does take a while to cast to your entire party, but eventually you could make your entire party have permanent telepathic bonds amongst one another in this web of telepathy. Reduce person, so in theory you can also shrink somebody down to diminutive, and then just say, fuck it, I'm going to leave you a tiny, tiny person now. And resistance. You can also make certain spells that affects objects and areas permanent. Alarm, animate objects, dancing lights, ghost sound, gust of wind, invisibility, magic mouth, Mordecai's private sanctum. You should always make that permanent, by the way. Phase door, prismatic sphere, prismatic wall, shrink item, solid fog, stinking cloud, any of the symbol spells, teleportation circle, wall of fire, wall of force, and web. What this lets you do, essentially, is these are the spells you use to create and then improve a lair, essentially. Wherever you call home as a wizard, you can permanently improve and trap that area to ensure that it's always protected even when you're not there. And that's permanency. It's one of the best level 5 spells.
It's one of the best spells, period. And moving on to level 6, most important ones here are stone to flesh and flesh to stone. Those are crucial to have. They do exactly what they say. Flesh to stone turns a creature to statue. Stone to flesh restores a creature from petrification. At level 7, you have different types of shifting, like phase door and plane shift, allowing you to create an invisible passage through wood or stone, or travel to another plane, respectively. Different teleports. You have limited wish at level 7, which alters reality within the spell limits. You've got to be careful about limited wish. You can really screw things up. With level 8, you can trap a soul in prison within a spell gem. You can create a clone. The duplicate awakens when the original dies. You can polymorph any object, which changes any subject into anything else. And for level 9, you get to the damn near deity spells, Wish, Shape Change, which transform you into any creature, and you can change the form once per round. Travel the ethereal plane, Energy Drain, someone with negative levels. The most notoriously evil one to be used against a player, because that's 2d4 negative levels. If you get hit with that spell, you're losing levels, and that is nasty.
Also get one of the most underappreciated, most bullshit spells ever, Imprisonment. Imprisonment is basically just, I put you under the earth now, and you stay stuck there until I use freedom on you. A thing worth noting, you may be thinking, well, they're stuck under the ground, can't they just dig out? No. I'm going to tell you what imprisonment does word for word. When you cast imprisonment and touch a creature, it is entombed in a state of suspended animation in a small sphere far beneath the surface of the earth. The subject remains there unless a freedom spell is cast at the locale where the imprisonment took place. Magical search by a crystal ball, a locate object spell, or some other similar divination does not reveal the fact that a creature is imprisoned, but discern location does. A wish or miracle spell will not free the recipient, but will reveal where it is entombed. If you know the target's name and some facts about its life, the target takes some -4 penalty on its will save, trying to prevent you from just shoving him down the earth to be forgotten for all eternity. It is the ultimate fuck you to the endgame villain.
The last one worth mentioning is Gate, connecting 2 planes for travel or summoning, which is very useful when you're having to deal with planar campaigns. Now, we did skip a lot of spells for brevity's sake, and most of those spells are damage-dealing spells with elemental damage types and stuff like that. Mostly self-explanatory. There's some that do different things that aren't as useful, but your main damage-dealing spells are of the wizard sorcerer.
There's also some spells we left out in the sense of being able to summon, bind, and contain various creatures from other planes of existence. Useful for evil spellcasters that wish to ensure they're protected against whatever they're summoning to do business with, such as if they're summoning a demon. There's certain spells they can use to take precautions against it leaving the summoning circle, essentially, so that it's bound to a single small space.
Just as a note of just how massive amount of spells there are, the spell list for the spell descriptions starts on page 196, halfway down on the player's handbook, and ends on page 303. So that is a really super massive amount of spells, and there's no way to cover them all.
No, unfortunately not. Unless Flux has anything to add to our list of spells that are worth noting.
You can only use a limited time per day.
And on that note, I think that's it for the final episode of Season 1. As we said at the beginning of the episode, unfortunately, Redfox will most likely not be back as co-host for Season 2, but we'll see how things go. It's going to be a few months between now and then. So we'll see how that goes. I hope you all enjoyed this season. Any final thoughts anyone wants to give on the season as a whole or any previous things we've discussed?
Paladins suck?
Paladins suck indeed. I think if anything else should be taken away from this, it is that this was a cautionary tale on why you should not take Paladin, unless you really, really want the roleplay benefit of having to be a Paladin who follows a very strict set of codes and rules set to a Paladin. So if you want to catch us elsewhere outside of the show, you can catch myself at twitch.tv/SovekOnivris. Also on Twitter, if you go to my Patreon, you can find a link to that, patreon.com/SovekOnivris, where you can support the show and my stream. Redfox also streams weekday nights, twitch.tv Redfox_Nightfox. Fluxin has twitch.tv/Fluxin. I hope everyone enjoyed. I hope we get more stuff to do for Season 2. We got lots of plans for it already. One way or the other, we'll either have Redfox or possibly a new host. We don't know. You'll have to tune in February to find out.
Or we'll have Sovek and two different Fluxes talking to each other.
Or perhaps we'll have two of both of us, and we'll just have this weird four-way intercourse going of discussion.
We'll have normal Flux, and then the one Flux that wants everything to burn.
So Hernando and Adnenre?
Yes.
Redfox will still be editor, so we won't subject him to that. So this should probably be out just before or around the height of the Christmas season. So hopefully this is the right time of season to say this. Merry Christmas, and whatever holiday you celebrate.
Glorious Kwanzaa.
Glorious Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever the hell you celebrate or don't. Whatever made-up holiday may exist between now and then. For all I know, by now we'll be celebrating Jubilexia Day or something, I don't know.
Because as you're listening to this, you still have about a week before Christmas.
And I swear to God, if Jubilexia Day actually becomes a thing between now and then, I demand forever royalties from anything relating to that holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving as well. I should have said that last episode, but, you know.
Hope you had a good one, because you're hearing this after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, hope you had a good one.
Happy 4th of July.
Hope you all enjoy. And from all of us, see you all till next season.
Bye.
Bye.